Hi everyone, and welcome to this third live stream for the Keyboard Chronicles. Great to have you here, and thanks to those that have already joined. Who have we got? Tammy and Walter, great to have you here. Um, Super pleased to be here again. So I thought we'd kick off with a few things today. And I'll probably keep this fairly short today, so it'll probably be around 20 minutes to half an hour. I just wanted to sort of test the old software again and catch up with everyone. Um, so I thought I'd start off with a topic that's near and dear to most keyboard players' hearts, and that's MIDI. So MIDI turns 40 this year, so which is obviously a huge milestone. I'm actually now wondering whether it was last year and they're just a bit delayed, but I think anyway, it's 40 years roughly since MIDI was first implemented. And there's a bit of a shebang being held at this year's NAMM at Anaheim in California, which starts next week to celebrate 40 years of MIDI. And there'll be more than 30 companies there. So if you are near Anaheim for some reason and hadn't considered going to NAMM, that alone might be worth make it worth your while. And even more excitingly, they're about to demonstrate again MIDI 2.0. I mean, most dedicated keyboard player aficionados will know that MIDI 2.0 has been around a few years now, but it's, like anything, it's slow in its uptake and implementation. But there'll be lots of demos of the power of MIDI 2.0. For those unaware, MIDI 2.0, and I'm far from an expert on MIDI or MIDI 2.0. MIDI 2.0 is backwards compatible, so and forwards compatible. So pretty much it will work on any MIDI device, no matter how old. Obviously, you're not going to get all the MIDI 2.0 functionality on, say, a DX7, but it still will work happily, which is amazing on its own. So yeah, I just thought I'd just mention happy birthday, MIDI. And love anyone's thoughts out there on whether you feel you've ever gotten your head around MIDI. I'm one of those idiots that I know how to connect two devices together with MIDI. I can usually make one control the other, but get much beyond that and I start to get confused as hell. And I don't think I'm alone from hanging out on some different forums and Facebook groups. But anyway, if you're a MIDI whiz, all the more power to you. Now, I obviously haven't addressed the elephant in the room. I ended up having Paul killed. He was becoming more popular than me. So I decided that it was time, just this, I shouldn't be probably confessing this online, but he needed to go. So, Vale Paul, it was lovely knowing you. But something had to change. So obviously Paul's not here today. He's otherwise engaged. We do miss him and he'll be back hopefully for the next live stream. And he's definitely going to be here for the next few podcasts. Yeah, Walter raises a good point there. MIDI outlives SCSI, Parallel, USB A and B, Mini, Micro, and Lightning. Absolutely, that's a good point. It is amazing, and I reckon we could add a few others in there as well. But that's great. Who remembers the SCSI drives? I don't miss those connections. So yes, it's a great point, Walter. So yeah, Paul will be back. What else was going to talk about? Just when I mentioned NAMM, for those of you that haven't had the privilege of going to NAMM, and unless you're based in US, or even if you are based in the US, it can be a pretty expensive prospect getting to NAMM. And during COVID, obviously NAMM had some challenges and has been held at different dates. So I mean, this year it's being held on the 13th to 15th of April, and I believe next year it's going back to its normal time of January. I think I've mentioned before on different live streams and shows, I've had the privilege of going to NAMM only once in 2020, just as COVID was hitting, and found it just a transformative experience. Just amazing to see so many people all interested in the same areas, so many of the manufacturers, software companies, let alone the demonstrations from some iconic players. It's a little bit like a religious pilgrimage, I suppose, which is appropriate to say over Easter. Highly recommend going to NAMM if you ever get the chance. Obviously, as I said, it's not cheap. What else we got in chat? Yeah, look, Paul probably has run up too many bar tabs, Tammy, in his expensive hotel rooms and jet-setting lifestyle. I don't know how he does it. touring around the world in one of the most successful bands, but he manages to pull it off and join us on the show, which is amazing, and we do appreciate it. So what else was I going to cover? Software updates. So for those of you out there that have different keyboards, it's been a few weeks of some big software and firmware announcements. So I'm just going to cover three of them. The YC series, so the Yamaha YC series keyboards, I'm lucky enough to own the YC61 and been seriously considering getting the 73 key version. I don't know, it's 73 now, 76. YC76, I think it is. It's had a version 1.3 update. They've added, so the CP80 electric grand piano, 16 DX7 sounds, including some bass, brass, and pad patches. And there's also 16 modern FM sounds. So for those of you who own the YC, you know it's predominantly a piano and organ driven keyboard, and synths were never the strong part, and nor were they designed to be, but they've certainly beefed that up in this 1.3 update. I haven't had a chance to install it yet, but that makes it probably even more desirable from a cover band viewpoint as a bit of an all-rounder, particularly as a second keyboard. I'm sort of very keen to get in there and do that. Walter, you say NAMM is Mecca. I nearly said that as well. You're right. It is the Mecca for musicians. Walter, you've got to get there someday. I don't know how. Maybe we all need to hijack a plane together or something to get over there. So that's the YC series. So get on that if you do own one of those great keyboards. Hydrasynth. I know there's a few Hydrasynth owners out there. The 2.0 update has come out in the past week or so. There's an expanded memory to 8 banks. New modulation source. There's an LFO quantizer. There's a bit reducer. There's a global FX bypass. New sustain pedal options, including a sostenuto pedal. More LED options, and I'm barely scratching the surface. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Free update for all Hydrasynth owners. I've never heard anything but positive stuff about the Hydrasynth. Don't own one, but it sounds like they've made it even juicier, which is great. And then the third one I wanted to rattle off is Sequential released their Take 5 sort of smaller option synth. It's in the last 6 months, I think it is. I lose track of time. They've released an update that adds another 128 presets and 128 extra user memory locations, so doubling the previous bank size, which is nice. For those of you who haven't checked out the Sequential Take 5, you can't afford a Profit 10 or 5 like I can't. It's obviously not the same thing, but if you're just after a really nice sequential synth of a smaller footprint, then that's definitely worth one. Mitch Town, how wonderful to have you here, sir. That's brilliant. Love the fact you. So for those of you unaware, Mitch was on the show recently, and Mitch is an amazing organ player, and you'll blush even though I can't see you at this stage, Mitch. Mitch has made a great point there that unfortunately Yamaha didn't update the organ with this 1.3 update to utilize the night trigger point. So yes, Mitch has flagged the fact that there will be an upcoming Keyboard Chronicles clone shootout episode, and that will be happening probably early in the second half of the year, but Mitch has very kindly offered to join Paul and I and talk about all the keyboard clone wheel options out there and what works well. I thank you, Mitch, and I was wondering what night trigger point, so I thought, because I thought I don't know that much, so yeah, high trigger point, that makes sense. Thanks, Mitch. So wonderful to have you here. So yeah, we'll be definitely getting into the nitty gritties of a whole bunch of clone wheels in coming months. So the other two brief things I wanted to cover was obviously a big loss in the past. Well, it's a little bit over a week now. On the 28th of March, iconic synth pioneer Ryuichi Sakamoto passed away after a long battle with cancer. For those of you aware of Mr. Sakamoto's work, you'll know it well and know it intimately. I mean, whether it was his work with the Yellow Magic Orchestra, his work on some iconic films soundtracks such as The Last Emperor, right through to 2015, he did a great score for The Revenant, it was. Huge loss. If you aren't aware of the Yellow Magic Orchestra, jump on YouTube and have a look at some of those clips, and you for the late 70s, early 80s, what pioneering work it was. So an enormous, enormous loss. So yeah, rest in peace, Roach. Yeah, it's just one of those iconic people that have passed, sadly. And on a more pleasant note, I thought I'd flag some upcoming guests. So not only have we had some brilliant previous guests like Mitch, um, it's a bit of a hectic few weeks for Paul and I over the coming weeks. So I don't think it's premature to flag the fact that in, what is it, less than 24 hours, in about 18 to 19 hours, I'll be spending a few hours with Paul, which is always a pleasure, of course, and Mr. Mike Garson, David Bowie's keyboard player, amongst many other things Mike's done. So Mike and I and Paul will be settled in for probably, I reckon, 90 minutes to 2 hours of chat on everything from Mike's work with Bowie right through to his work with the Smashing Pumpkins, Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, his wonderful jazz ensemble he's been involved with, Free Flight, let alone everything else he has done. So that's a really big, big pleasure for us to talk to Mike tomorrow. So incredibly looking forward to that. And I'm just looking across to the chat. Walter's put hashtag Nick Rhodes 2023. Look, you could not get more agreement from me. We're still trying, Walter. Believe me, we're still trying. Unfortunately, he's not one of the names I'm about to announce that we're doing over the coming weeks, but we're working on it. So yeah, Mike Garson, very excited about that. If I was going to guess, that'll be a 2-part episode. Another huge honor is to talk to Mr. David Sanchez. So for a Bruce Springsteen tragic like me, this is particularly exciting, but for those that are less of a Springsteen fan, David Sanchez was one of the original keyboard players in the E Street Band, was involved in the first, I've got to do my research yet, but first 2 albums for the E Street Band, left to have his own solo career, which has been amazing, and has also worked with a whole range of other incredible acts. So we're talking to David in the next 10 days or so, which will be amazing. Yeah, Mitch, I thought you might appreciate that one. I can imagine you're a fan. Yeah, that's going to be a real pleasure. And I absolutely will ask him about his time with Sting as well. Yes, I'm going to manage to avoid the Springsteen hole as far as just talking about that. He's just done so much amazing stuff. So yeah, very excited to talk to David. He was obviously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the E Street Band, but as I said, that's far from his whole career. So looking forward to that. For the Aussies, Dan Mansfield's coming on the show. So there's an iconic Australian band, UMI, plus that Dan has played keyboards with on and off. And he's also a member of the Honey Sliders. We'll be catching up with Dan to talk about everything on his career. So we're a bit excited about that as well. It'll be great to talk to Dan. And then something totally left of centre, Darnalog. So I don't know how know of the acts, the Comet is coming. If you haven't seen them, have a search on YouTube, and there's an amazing NPR Tiny Desk concert with the Comet is coming. And Darnalog is the keyboard player, and as you'll see, highly energetic keyboard player from that outfit. He's coming on the show again in the next couple of weeks. And last but very much not least, Ms. Rachel Eckroth, who plays keyboards with St. Vincent and Rufus Wainwright alongside her own amazing career, solo albums, you name it. Rachel is an amazing artist as well, and we've got Rachel coming on again in the next couple of weeks. It's quite a hectic time, and there are a couple of other ones we're just finalising actual times, so there's a lot happening over the next month. But sorry, Walter, still no Nick Rhodes at this stage. So there you go. I just wanted to do a quick say hi to everyone. That will probably do. I haven't got a lot more to actually chat on. I'll just look back on the chat. So, well, yeah, everyone's touring. You're not right. And actually, that's an interesting point. I don't know about anyone else, but I can't afford to go and see half the acts that are actually touring. That's just the reality. There is so much going on. Although one I am excited to catch up with is the Stranglers. Anyone that loves the Stranglers tends to be a pretty dedicated fan. The Stranglers are touring Australia in, I think it's next week or week after next they arrive. And that's another little fun time. We had Toby Hounsham, the new keyboard player from the Stranglers, on the show for episode 50 from memory. Toby and I catching up and hopefully for a bit of an onstage rig tour while he's in Australia, which will be great fun. So that's another one to look forward to. But yeah, the touring, I don't know about anyone else, but I could be out 4 nights a week seeing some wonderful artists. So the Doobie Brothers, for example, are in Australia at the moment with Michael McDonald and apparently are kicking butt as an outfit. So, and I know some of my US friends have seen them recently and talked hugely about how great they are. And Tammy, you're right, Queens represent. And I think we've mentioned on the live stream before, we absolutely try to target and prioritize female players because there are so many wonderful ones out there. And it is a male dominated area still at this stage, but we try and showcase as many female players as we can possibly do. So that's great. Otherwise, I'm just thinking that would probably cover us off. So we'll be back. You'll be hearing my lovely voice and hopefully more of Paul's lovely voice very, very soon after Mr. Mike Garson tomorrow. We'll have that episode hopefully live, or part one. I think it'll be 2 parts. Part one will be live in the next week. And we'll be back for another live stream in the next month or so. We're going to try and make these a monthly event. Really appreciate you all being on here live. That's always really flattering. And also a big thanks to our sponsors again of the show. So our patrons on Patreon. So Tammy, who's on this chat as well. Thank you, Tammy, and Tammy's Musical Stew. Brother Paul Brown from the Water Boys. I'm hoping the Water Boys get to Australia too. If you've not seen them live, they are absolutely a force of nature. Radio Grande, if you thought this live stream was going to go longer and have a spare 10 minutes, do have a look at Radio Grande, Grande, on YouTube. They've got some amazing clips on their funk reimaginings of songs. And my good friend Mike at Midnight Mastering. I know a lot of us are used to mixing and mastering or have friends that mix and master our tunes that if we're creating our own stuff. But if you don't, I cannot recommend midnightmastering.com enough. And I am not being just paid to say that. I'm saying he's brilliant because I release all my stuff on there. With Mike masters and mixes all my stuff, and I could not recommend him highly enough. Walter Magni. All right, I'll be looking that up. I'll plead ignorance on that, Walter. The name rings a small bell, but I'll have to look into that. I'm certainly not a font of knowledge on so many things. And Tammy, you've asked what was my highlight for 2022? Probably keeping this podcast afloat. So it's been absolute fun throughout, but as you can imagine, there's a bit of work behind the scenes, and our other lives can sometimes get in the way for that. But it's been an absolute highlight keeping this afloat and seeing it go from strength to strength. And that's thanks to obviously the wonderful guests we get on, including you, Mr. Town, and many, many others. Paul and I have said at the end of many shows, we are yet to run into a bastard as far as a keyboard player that is arrogant or snappy or uninterested or whatever. Of the 73 episodes we've done so far, every single person has been a gem. And for that, we're hugely grateful. So that was my highlight, Tammy. I will run. Believe it or not, it's still sunny out here. So I better go out and actually get some sun before I spend too many hours, well, not too many hours, but lots of hours with Mr. Garson tomorrow. So appreciate everyone dropping in. Walter, Aha, of course it is. Magnus from Aha. Yeah, look, major Aha fan here, and they're still going strong, still releasing new stuff. So yeah, thanks everyone. Absolutely love. I know it's short and sharp, but absolutely brilliant seeing you, at least in the virtual realm, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.